Years ago, I used to run a drive-in movie theater. At first, it was a dream job. I always wanted to be a filmmaker, and at the time, this was as close to the film industry as I could get. But one of the worst things that happened while I was there was it revealed to me what an accurate portrait of general audience's taste was. Which is a fancy way of saying, I finally got to see what mass audiences liked and didn't like, which movies reviewed positively and which didn't. Not from professional critics, but genuine average people. And what I found was the majority of people have bad taste.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects were wonderful, and the storyline was wonderful. And I'm gonna probably come back and watch it a couple more times.
I don't want to sound like a film snob or shit on people for what they do or don't like. Taste is a subjective thing. I did an entire video discussing it. But there's undoubtedly low and high standards for entertainment. And the majority of people, in my opinion, have very low standards. And it's only getting worse. Before landing a job at a movie theater, I was a high school kid who was quickly becoming a film junkie. I started to read books on essential movies to watch and made in-depth watch lists of top directors and actors. I think anyone that seriously gets into film goes through this early shotgun phase where you try to consume as much content as possible and, hopefully, begin to form your own taste. So when I started work at the movie theater, I just assumed everyone else was like me. I thought people were going to want to see smarter and more well-crafted movies. But it turns out just as many people came out to watch the live-action Marmaduke movie as Inception. Yes, that really happened one summer. In fact, more people actually came for Marmaduke than Inception. That's not fair though, right? Marmaduke is a kid's movie, so it's naturally going to be a success, as parents are always looking for safe content to bring kids to. Well, I also witnessed several Adam Sandler movies make a ton of money, and I was working at the theater from 2007 onward. These weren't the early Sandler movies I'm talking about. I remember Don't Mess with the Zohan being fucking packed. There was also the Fast and Furious movies, and the Transformers movies, and I could go on and on. The point is, big, dumb, or even just dumb movies made big money. And even more frustrating, critically reviewed and more artistic films were becoming less and less common and even harder to watch. In fact, lots of the movies I wanted to watch weren't even playing at the theater I worked at. I ended up having to find some artsy independent theater to be able to watch them. And for the decade that I worked in the theater industry, I saw this trend only become more common. Simple, dumb movies sold lots of tickets, while smarter, more complex films drew mixed results. Seeing this, theater bookers booked more dumb movies on more screens, which in turn meant studios produced more simple movies and less complex films. And the few complex works that were produced were given less advertising and push. The result is the current film industry. An industry focused on pumping out simple movies either tied to pre-existing franchises or big-name celebrities, and the availability of more diverse films is greatly reduced. At its worst, it's limiting our choices to one or two blockbuster movies, a simple comedy, or a safe kids movie. Now, lots of people say they love movies, but when you probe them about which movies are their favorites, they generally trend towards common blockbusters and larger budget pictures. The problem with this is, you end up with a very narrow perspective on film. If you're only exposing yourself to these types of films, you're limiting your own palette. If all you watch is big budget major studio films, your taste is going to be limited to this category. This becomes a problem when new releases come out and your standards are set by the small palette you've made for yourself. If Avengers Endgame is your definition of a perfect film, what would you think of something like Alien or Jaws? But much like how incest porn suddenly became more prevalent on porn sites, studios are reacting to what sells, which in turn alters what they produce, limiting our viewing options and reinforcing this system in a type of closed-loop cycle. The problem is that the bar continues to be lowered. I would go as far as to say it's in a very low spot right now. It's gotten to the point that anything that's just competent reviews well and is critically praised. Movies like Wonder Woman and Black Panther are heralded as the greatest things to happen for the women's and black movements. Is Black Panther really the pinnacle of black cinema? Disney seemed to think so. Movies that are honestly mediocre and 5 or 6 out of 10 at best are being lauded as 8 and 9 out of 10 pictures. And movies that are well made but far from critical masterpieces, are undeservingly now awarded this prestige. Where this is most prevalent for me is the hype articles coming out about new releases. Something like Squid Game suddenly gets put on the same pedestal as a TV show like The Sopranos? Is Squid Game good? Yes, I think it's very well made. Is it a masterpiece and deserving of the pop cultural phenomena it's become? No, I honestly don't think so. While it was well crafted, I can't say it's all that original. As someone who was once obsessed with Japanese and Asian films, I've seen several other works that have just as crazy of a premise. Ever heard of a 21-year-old movie called Battle Royale? And if you include anime, Squid Game is tame in comparison. How about an anime called Kaiji Ultimate Survivor? It's about large groups of people with overwhelming debts they can't possibly afford to get out of, who, in their desperation, participate in simple but deadly games of varying skills to compete for large cash prizes. These games are run by a shadowy organization for the amusement of elite rich people. Oh fuck, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Kaiji came out in 2007 and was based on a manga from the 90s. So why did Squid Game get so popular? I think it comes down to the Netflix effect. For all its pros and cons, one thing Netflix is great for is its wide library of content. People who may never have given something like Squid Game a chance before suddenly are more open to it when it's blasted right into their face on the Netflix home screen. So now you have middle-aged mothers who've never watched Battle Royale gushing about a similarly violent TV show. Teenage boys who would never look at the foreign section of a video store are binging a Korean television show. I think it's also important to note that the majority of Squid Game viewers watch the dubbed version over the subtitled original. That means more people would rather watch this.
Your mother and I were talking the other day. She told me you were out of the country on a business trip. What was that guy talking about, huh? You can't be a dead. The same Sang-woo who went to SNU, right?
Than this.
너네 가게 갔었는데 너네 엄마가 너 해외 출장 갔다고 하던데. 아니 그리고 아까 그 소리 또 뭐야? 네가 빚이 있어? 아 쌍문동에 자랑 서울대 조상우가?
Why? For the simple reason that most people don't like to read subtitles. Perhaps because they just haven't watched enough good subtitle work to see the value of watching films in other languages. But this data points to the type of general audience I'm talking about. People with low standards that are blown away by a well-packaged but very unoriginal TV show. South Park famously poked fun at this topic, implying that people's entertainment standards were dictated by an actual real-world bar, and that renowned filmmaker James Cameron was the only one raising that bar. Which is ironic considering how dumbed down his recent films are compared to his earlier work. Maybe I'm being too critical though. To reference South Park once again, I often find myself feeling like Stan in the episode You're Getting Older. After having watched so many great films in my life already, newer movies often appear derivative and, well, shit in comparison. Have I become a cynical, jaded asshole over time? Maybe. Or is it really unreasonable for me to ask for a higher standard from a now 100-year-old industry? Maybe in another 10 years I'll think films in general are a lesser art form and start getting into museums and galleries. It's not a simple answer. Ultimately, if we want better content, then we have to speak with our wallets and our viewership. If big dub movies start to make less money, studios will alter what they produce. We need to vote with our attendance at the box office and home video purchases. But teenagers are always going to need movies to ignore while they make out, and parents are always going to need safe content to bring their children to. So if you're not finding high quality content at the box office, look somewhere else. Instead of buying into all the hype-driven clickbait articles, try reading more critical articles written by seasoned film reviewers. Maybe try scrolling through the deeper catalogs of Netflix and Disney Plus instead of simply choosing from the home pages. I know with any medium, there's always going to be a divide between the so-called connoisseurs like myself and the general audience. It just scares me how large this divide has gotten, how low the bar continues to get, and the selection we're going to be left with if nothing changes.